Hi there, it's Chuck with Pocket Snakes. Okay, so we have a 4 foot, and I've marked it at 3 foot, and this is the middle, which is 2 foot on this pair of, well, this is one of the 2 cores. And down here, we're at right about 12 millimeters, then it drops to 10 millimeters, goes down by 2 millimeters. And then up here, we're at 8.6 millimeters, and above here, we're at and it drops again up here to 7 millimeters. And then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.5 millimeters. But I marked it because there's going to be a belly from here over, which is going to add about 1 millimeter to all the measurements here. And then from that mark up there, there's another belly that'll be braided. So I'm trying to show the process. But from this little mark, you measure just to the end, and you cut yourself some strips that are 3 times longer than the end of what you want. And now in order to go around 8 millimeters, you probably are going to want 6 strands of whipmaker cord, which will be 12 plate. And then you'll have to go up to probably 16 millimeters, or not 16 millimeters, but you'll have to bump it to 16 strands. Which is a total of 8 strands that are folded in half. So we've got 5 strands now. Now I'm braiding these from the tip to the hilt because the end layer, the last layer, will be braided that direction. You find the center bite of all these strands. And I'll show you a trick for where the transition area is here. If you run a needle through the widths of all of the strands, all 6, right about the center bite. And so you've got all 6 strands. You come up and you find the orientation of the bias and you put the needle in. Then you can lay these 6 strands across. So this is, I'm going to go straight into a whipmaker plate. So I'm going under 3/3. And remember, this is going to have 2 layers over top of the bump you're creating, but this just adds to the taper and the compression in the core. And any fuzzies at the end of this will be minimal. but I'm aligning this braided layer to the bias. There's a double bias because this is layers of material. And the pin will help you kind of keep those strands in order. Now, I'm not really tensioning these right this second. This method takes a little longer. The top layer won't be whipmaker cord in this case. The top layer is going to be 275 paracord. This is eventually going to be burgundy and black, so I've chosen black as the belly layers, but you could use any color you want. So, okay, we've completed one pass. Now I'm going to start snugging it up. And you'll notice my tensioning is not harsh. I'm just roughly tacking it down. And then I'll pull the pin out after I get through the second pass. And I may be able to just plate a 12 over this whole thing, but I probably halfway between these two bumps will add a couple strands or 4 strands. So just otherwise the angle will shift as you go. So I'm not the fastest platter out there for sure. But I do try and lock the tension in as I go. And I care more about the tension levels than I care about speed. So I can pull that pin and I can just, I'm going to add more tension as I go. So and in this case, you probably are going to end up hearing me breathe because I've got the camera about 4 inches to the right of my head to give you almost the same view I have. You may get a little bit of bounce because it's easy for me to hit it with the chair because it's sitting right next to me. But do you see how this layout, when you do it, creates a taper down? If you do a square start on this, it'll be a much more pronounced ridge, whereas having all of them in alignment lays it a little bit better. And this all is to make these. This is a matched pair of 4-footers. And so I want them to behave and roll the same. You can be more playful if you're not doing matched pairs, but then each of the whips is slightly different. But and I'm not concerned about the little feathers sticking up because they can be trimmed off as we go. And there's going to be, again, 2 layers put on beyond this hand-plated layer. And one advantage of braiding vertically is you can watch the tension as you lay it. Try and twist the core left and right. Another advantage is you can lift it up and keep the area you're plating pretty steady. I think everybody does stuff differently. I do stuff really differently than most people, but I have a lot of people that are always interested in how I get some of the results I get. And then other people are like, well, that's a lot of extra work. It's like, well, this is how I do it to get the results I want. So now we're starting to go over another bump. So we have an area here, just to give you an idea. That area was about 8.2 millimeters. And after plated layer, it's 11 or 10. So it went up 2 millimeters for one braided layer of that. Whipmaker cord. So it'll be 8 to 10, and then it'll go up by 2 millimeters because this is one layer of spiral bolstering. And then after I come over it again, this area that's 10 will be 12. And then when I go over it with the 275, this 12 will be 14 millimeters at least. Or probably it'll go up to 16 millimeters right in the middle of the whip. So this will have a nice taper when it's done because I've layered the tapers and the tension. So when you have a fuzzy sticking out, you can snip it off, or you can these are pretty dull scissors. You can also hit them with a lighter and they'll swirl away inside. But you can see that there's an angle change to being a bit wider here, because in order to cover it well, you've got to change the angle a little bit as you braid. So I probably am going to have to bump here in a couple, like right about here, I'm going to add a couple strands and go up to 16. progress is always seems to be slower as you're doing it. You always want it to go faster. But usually I sit and turn on some music or a college lecture in the background about physics or something of interest to me. But or you can turn on an audiobook or something. But you have to be careful what you turn on for sound while you're shooting a video for one of these things. And I just shoot them as though you're sitting here with me. Normally I'd be talking to you if you were sitting here watching and probably answering a bunch of questions. So I try and provide some useful information. And so width-wise, up here we're almost 12 or 11, a little over 11, 11.6 millimeters, 13.7 millimeters down here. So that goes from 11 to 13. So there's a 2 millimeter bump right there. And so you're going to get kind of a stepped pyramid because we're creating a taper instead of braiding over a true taper. But visually, by the time you put another layer on this, most of those bumps will go away. And then the next layer, you'll get a pretty smooth, because most of the bumps are in the underlayment. So again, this is just one way to build a whip. I prefer it because I want the whip to have a core that you drive a truck over and you're not going to split something or break something. And that has the shot very, very contained. And the one thing is you have a couple different types of whips, in my opinion. You have whips that use a fulcrum, like a bull whip or a stock whip that have a long handle. Or in snake whips, you have a mass whip. So you're relying on mass to accelerate the whip and to have a smooth flow. In this case, on most of the shorter snake whips, they're shot loaded about halfway down. It's not a huge load of shot in this case. Okay, so we're 6 inches and 6 inches, so we're right about where we need to add the 2 strands. Nice part with working in nylon. You can put a pin in it. Oh, that's a piece of leather. Okay. Move the tripod just a touch. Okay, and you find the center bite. You tuck these two strands up underneath. The last strand came from this side. 1, 2, 3. So now we're at under 4. And over 4. 1, 2. 3, 4. Under 4, over 4. Now we've got the doubled strands up here, so there's 2. Top one is attached. The next one is probably not. Here's the double strand on this side. This one is attached to there, so I'm cranking it down. And this one lays right next to that one, and you don't want to tug it. You just want to lay it. And this one is the second strand, and you're just going to lay it. You put a little bit of tension to kind of lock it down, but you don't want too much. This one is also one of the new strands. It's under 4, over 4. This one is also one of the new strands. Under 4, over 4. This one's attached. And I'm going back to tensioning because I know I've got all the new strands laid. People are like, well, how much difference in the diameter does that make? A little bit. It makes, you'll see there's a little bit of a bump when you change to a larger. Number of strands, but we're at 16 plate now. So on the next layer from up here, it'll start at 12. And then probably up here, I'll go right in the middle of this section, I'll go to 16 and go over the top of this. And then probably in between these two bumps, I'll probably go to 20 on my next pass. So that as you add the little bumps, you're adding them in the middle of other bumps, smoothing out the taper. And just like if you were to drop strands, you can watch the taper get smaller as you have fewer strands. So But you have to vary the tension as you go with an additive build. And this is such a variable lens on this. This is a little GoPro camera I've got setting. Right now it's above my forehead. But hopefully I'm not out of frame quite yet. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in it again. And so up here we're at 13.6, and down here we're at 13.8. So it didn't bump it a bunch. 13.5 and 12.5 in width because it's oval shaped. So it goes from 12 to 13, so it goes up 1 millimeter this way, but it barely goes up 0.5 millimeter the other way. So it becomes more round the more layers you add. With these oval builds, the more layers you add and crunch things down, the more round they are at the base, but the more pronounced the bias is in the middle down to the tip. Lifted it up a little bit. Might be able to rotate this camera a little bit. Anyway, like I said, I'm not the fastest platter or plater out there. I try and do things so that I can make them the same each time as best I can. I used to shoot tons of pictures as I worked. Now I'm starting to shoot some video, obviously. I used to keep all the pictures and stuff until somebody was interested in how I go about stuff, and then I'd share it with them and send a whole bunch of pictures of transition points with no explanation. Or rarely I'd have somebody come over to my little shop and hang out with me for a day. But now we're about to go up 2 millimeters here. Okay, because we're going from a double wrapped spiral wrap to a single wrap spiral wrap bolster. So I probably have a week's worth of intermittent breeding on this pair of whips left because they're 4 foot apiece. And there's 2 bellies that are hand laid. And I probably won't shoot the whole process. I'll just shoot kind of how I go about adding braided bellies to stuff. Some people spend a lot of time bolstering stuff with string and creating tensioning dynamics. With artificial sinew, that's not a bad idea. It's just cuts into your hands. I'd rather lay an extra layer of belly to create mostly the same effect. And there's all sorts of ways that work for this. So that camera's kind of warm. I bumped it. I'm shooting this in 4K 30 frames a second with no stabilization, so I can get 45 minutes to an hour before the camera starts complaining. If I can put some air on it or blow on the camera, it does seem to help. But some days I'm talking way too much, and other days it's like I'm just more sanguine and calm. Right now there's a TV on in the background that's driving me nuts. Because the rest of the house is here, and they're busy doing the things that they want to do. I did lock the dogs out and close the door. So. If you have friends who are interested in making stuff or making whips, or if you have questions for me, you're welcome to email or message me or whatever, and I'll talk to you about what I think about different ways of going about things. But I would say try some of this stuff that I'm doing out and test it out and see what you think of it. Because nothing will convince you how something will work as well as you trying it and putting the time and effort into it and see if it's worth the result. You know, there's a lot of ideas I think, well, those are great. Are you going to change how you're doing it? Probably not. Once in a while, I'll try somebody else's thought process and I'll adopt it if it works well or speeds me up and doesn't change the outcome of the overall project. But I've been trying to get this to work smoothly for a while. And these layers will all kind of gel, and the tension will even out, and the core will find its resting place in between all the strands, and everything will settle in if you just pick up this whip when you're done with it and throw it for 10 or 15 minutes rather than roll it. You can roll it, but you're going to roll all the nuanced bias out of this design. You can roll it to be truly round, and then you have an omnidirectional whip. And if that's what you want, roll the cores as you go, and you'll get it to be super omnidirectional. But I like it to hold that kind of oval shape, because I like being able to steer the end of it with the ball end. And that requires a bit of layered tension. I'm getting down to the last 9 inches of braiding here, and then I'll have to do the other core, and then I'll come back and I'll do the overlay on, or not the overlay, but the next layer on both cores, and then I'll have completed cores. So I put a couple copper heat sinks on the back of this camera to help heat dissipate, but I didn't put a fan on it because I didn't want the fan noise to be annoying. I'm probably getting out of camera range, and I can't lift this core up any higher. Sorry. Maybe pull it out. This part is kind of boring, but so the question will become, okay, it says takes it from 12.5 millimeters to 15.5 millimeters. So adding 2 layers only. So 12.5 to 15, right? So it adds 1.25 millimeters per side to have 2 layers of this material. Pretty neat. You'll see it's got a nice kind of flow to it. Anyway, I'm going to finish this last little bit. Stay in tension. Don't slide. So this process takes a little bit at a time. And it gets to moving faster sometimes, the less you have to think about stuff. But one nice thing with nylon is you can just cut it off and get to work pleating it, and it has very little stretch, and it's very consistent with what it does. So you end up with a very consistent thing, whereas leather, your strips are going to settle, and if you haven't at least dry stretched the leather, it's going to be pretty squirrely. If you wet stretch the leather, you can take more of the stretch out of it. But it has a unique springiness because it's a natural material that you're fighting to get it to do what you want. And I like leather braiding a lot. But the nylon, especially this whipmaker cord, is really beautiful stuff. I'm finally getting to the end of this. And people have said, well, you only need 1.25 times the length to braid something. I said, well, that's true, except when you're allowing for angle changes, and then 1.5 is a safer bet. And as you see, I'm getting down to the end. I've gone from 45 degrees up here to about 60 degrees down here, and I'm going to have just enough to get to here, which is the end of the shot, probably a little further. There's a reason I start off with 3 times the initial length, because it gives me time and a half on each side. And that way I can change the pitch as I go rather than add more strands. You get a little better compression at 60 than you do at 45. It also makes a shorter joint length, so you get a little smoother roll, or tighter roll. I don't know about smoother, but people have opinions about what angle they like their stuff at, and there's reasons for it. But these will have a 60 degree in the first bit of the whip, and the rest of it will be much more towards 45. I hate it when I end up out of frame. But fuck me. Come on. Stupid things. Fighting with it. So we're at the end, pretty much. The shop bag ends right here, so we're getting there. Anyway. I probably could have thought about this a little bit better, but better at making whips than shooting videos, I guess. one of the things is if I'm concentrating on something, it's very hard for me to sit and talk at the same time. Doesn't make it ideal for shooting videos that have words, and talking slows down my breathing, which is okay too. It's just good to know. It requires processing and thought. The breathing doesn't require a lot of processing and thought, but it thinking about what I'm doing to try and explain it takes more processing power than doing the work, you know. Okay, we're down here at the very bottom. And 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Make sure you get all those tensioned up. Then I put a pin in it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of barred cement around this 1-inch section down here, which will kind of lock all that tension into place. But you can already see the beautiful kind of a arc shape you get, you know, on both sides. So it always looks like a bigger mess than it is. But this just locks the tension off so that you can take the pin out and cut off all the bits once it dries. And that's where the buildup will be anyways, on that end of that shot. Anyway, this check with pocket snakes. This has to dry, and I'm going to do the same exact belly on this one, which is basically set up as identically as I could. So, anyway, I'll be talking to you guys later. I'm going to pause this or stop this, and then I'll come back, and I don't know that I need to shoot an hour. So for 2 foot, it took me an hour. The 3 foot will take me probably an hour and a half, and the full overlay will take me a couple hours. In 275, it may take me 3 hours to do 4 feet if I'm not talking. But if I'm talking and explaining as I'm adding strands, it takes quite a bit longer. Again, it's Chuck with Pocket Snakes. Please like, share, subscribe if you hung out this long. I appreciate you guys. Have a great day. Hi there, this is Chuck with Pocket Snakes. So I've got this marked at the 3 foot from the back end. It's a foot from the tip. This is a 4 foot whip. And I've cut 4 9-foot long strips. These are on the center bite, and this is where the oval center line is and the braiding center line is. I lifted the camera up. I have these are plastic bags that are full of in this case they're full of rawhide that is tempering, because I play with rawhide from time to time. So up here it's 5.9 millimeters roughly, or 6 millimeters. So I'm using 8 strips of this 3/16 inch whipmaker cord to start with. And I'll braid for probably 6 inches, so somewhere in here, maybe in the middle of here I'll switch, or depending on the angle, I'll switch halfway to the next bump. The next bump, it goes up to, I think, almost 8 millimeters. So it goes up by 2. And this is part of a pair of what will be 275 paracord whips. So I'm just gonna lay down some plating, and then I'll bump it and lay down some more, and bump it, lay down some more. And I may have to cut the audio out for most of this because there's a TV running in the other room. And I hate TVs. I don't watch TV or movies in general. So I sit and plat and work on my stuff. Okay, so there is a completed pass of 8. I'm going to snug these. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this will eventually be covered from the tip. For the overlay will be 275 paracord, but these are 2 bellies that are inside of 2 whips. They're 2 bellies of this whip that are hand plated, that are inside of this 4-foot whip to create compression and tension both in the core. And unlike a lot of people's whip designs, this method allows me not to have to drop strands. I actually add 2 strips or 4 strands at a time to keep patterning even if I'm doing pattern work. And the advantage of this is there's nothing to come loose or work loose or pop out or get fuzzy, so it's kind of a different way of assembling a whip. I build them both directions. Here lately on snake whips, I've been building them from the other end of the whip. So I'm starting to put a little more tension in this. So and these are wanting to seat it just below 45, so I'm probably going to add a couple more, and then I'll bump it up with the next to be 12 plate. This is an 8 plate in just whipmaker plate, which is under half over half. It's a fairly fast way to plate. It has some advantages. It kind of makes it more square, and the square faces the oval, and so it allows for that oval shape to be slightly pronounced. Makes it harder to roll the whip if you want it rolled, but okay, so we got 4 fingers here and 4 fingers there. So I'm going to put a pin in it real quick. And I'm going to measure off one side. To the end of the strand, and then fold it. Well, that strand's too short for the other side. This is a new spool of 1,000 feet of this black whipmaker cord. So I get this, I source this at the paracord shop, paracordshop.com. It's nylon black, 1,000-foot spool of whipmaker cord. I'm just gonna undo it. Okay, so best laid plans of mice and men. A little bit of a wiggle there, so. The nice part is you can always just measure off your starter strands for this method of breeding from tip to hilt. You want to find the center bite with, in this case, with the shortest strand. I'm going to cut out the wrinkly bit. So now this is center bite. So I'm going to fold these two strands underneath and pull this pin. Thread the pin in. So I'm switching from under 2 over 2 to under 3. Over 3. Under 3 over 3. Under 3 over 3. And I got a higher camera angle and pointed it more or less down at the ground, kind of forward over that direction, so you could, so I could keep it in frame. So this is one of the loose strands. So this one just gets laid in parallel next to the strand above it, without tensioning it on one side, and just snugging it up and doing the same on the other side. And then everything else I can tension down, although this one also is loose. I can't just immediately tension it down. I gotta tuck it under and then give it a little tension. So now we're plating 12 plate instead of 8 plate. And so there's a lot of reasons that this is a nice way to plait a whip, but the best one I can think of, I started plaiting stock whip thongs this way. So that the end of it would hold together. You wouldn't beat it apart, which is nice. And I thought, well, let me try it with snake whips. It works best with narrower gauges or thinner strands and multiple strands. If you have like old school 650 or 550 cord, each one of the times you add 4, you can barely see it here, but each time you add 4, it's quite a bump, because 2 layers of this material on both sides adds 2 millimeters width, but 2 of 550 cord will add 4 millimeters in width. So you can put finer layers inside of your even 550 paracord whips. If you have to do bellies, this whipmaker cord is really the best thing I've ever found, besides an Aramid aircraft lacing tape, which is even better than this. This, when you squish it down, is less than 0.5 millimeter thick, and the aircraft wiring harness tape is 1/100 of an inch thick. So you could add 3 layers. If you wanted to have 3 bellies that were hand plated, you could do that in the aircraft wiring harness tape without impacting the overall diameter very much. And so there's a natural bump here where this starts coming into the shop bag, or into the shop bag on this. So we've got 4 fingers and about 4 fingers. So this bump in diameter, by adding an extra 2 strands, is right between a smaller spot and a bigger spot. And it'll make the next layer smoother and less obvious as to where the taper and the strand adds are. And it's different than a standard traditional tapered build, but strand additive or strand dropping techniques allow you to finally step down the diameter of things and control on your way down how you want it to be. So whenever you're braiding up here, it also tries to braid down there. And these strands aren't as long as the overlay strands. Since this is a 4-foot whip, you'll have 2 strands to start with that are 4 times 3 or 12 feet long, roughly, for the first 2 strands. And you can just measure off those and keep going. I'll probably make them 13 foot, so there's 6 inches extra. Or I might even make them 14 feet. So there's a foot to hold on to when you get to the end of the whip. You can always cut stuff shorter, but it's hard to cut it longer. So but using that 3 times the length you're braiding, you can see how little waste on the previous belly. There's like 4 or 5 inches of the tips, and it gives you some room to oopsie and not screw up the entire belly and have to unbraid it to start over because you didn't have enough material. This overlay will go to 16 somewhere in here, and then up here it'll go to 20 to go on down the whip. Not sure exactly where I'm going to do those. I probably will move the camera a little bit as I go. because this is a 3-foot belly that I'm putting into a 4-foot whip. And it's going to take me an hour and a half, 2 hours to lay this. If I'm not thinking about it and I'm just plating and I'm not talking too much. The problem with talking too much is it's a lot of effort to think about. I mean, I could talk about whips all day because I'm kind of obsessed with the topic, but okay, I'm going to grab this pin. I'm going to quick release lark's head. Lift it back up. And if you don't want to accidentally capture this strand, you can pull the bubble on the quick release lark's head. Anyway. I usually map my adds and drops based on the angle of the pleating. And I also try and plan them, okay, it's like I'm going to have to add some strands before I get down here where it bumps. I usually try and do it halfway between a bump and where I'm going to need it. And I also try and do it by, you have four fingers, and it bumps in diameter here. So halfway between this bump here and down here, so right in here is where I'm going to add those extra 2 strands on the center bite, which will become 4 strands. And we'll go from 12 to 16. And like a lot of things, it's all about consistency. And some of it is knowledge, some of it is you just get the gist of how to do something. And because this is a matched pair, I've got to basically add these, and even in the bellies, right at the same points. So I'll use the other whip as a reference. Once I get this belly done, I'll come back and lay the next belly in the same manner with the same strand adds in the same places to create the same effect so that they're as close as I can make them. Okay, so we have 4 fingers here and 4 fingers there to the back of this. And so I'm going to tension all these to about 15 pounds, which people always ask how I know how much that is. It's like, well, I've done this a long time, and I can be off by 5 pounds, but I'm trying to make it snugged down consistently, all 12 strands in this case. I'm about to add some stuff. When I work on longer whips, I'll go to the top of the tripod and tie this piece of cord up higher, or put a hook on top of the tripod instead of the ring that I use. And when you have a little extra to to work with. If you get off by a little bit, it also doesn't end up being short. Now these are 3.5, almost 4 feet long on each side, which means these are down to 8-foot strips. Okay, tuck those strands underneath. Now I'm going from under 3/3 to under 4/4. Under 4/4. Under 4/4. That one is a slidey one. Okay, so now I've got a single strand which I know is attached. I've got 3, so I'm going under 4/4. Now a doubled strand. So this one's attached, so I'm tightening it down first on the left side. Under 4/4. This one's attached, so I'm going to crank it down a little bit tighter. And now I have the 2 loosey ones that are connected. I'm going to lay it alongside. Under 4/4. I'm going to snug that strand down just a little bit. I'm laying it alongside. This one's just under 4/4. Now this one is attached to that side, so I'm just snugging it down gently. And now I can just go back to plating it. About 10 or 12 pounds of tension here. But I just set my hands to what they feel like and tension them up, snug them up, and then plate them loose. And it might look like I'm yanking on this. I'm really not. I'm pulling it until it stops gently. And if your tensioning is straight, then your braiding will end up straight when you're going vertical, when you're braiding vertically. So horizontally you can really crank on things, but if there's any disparity to how much tension you're putting in something, this whole thing will rotate around. So you can watch it as you go. And you want this braid line to intersect and go right over the top of the next one down, which is in alignment with the core underneath, which is in alignment with press flat material that's stuffed full of shot. So this is one way to use steel shot in a way that steel won't leak out. You can also hot soak it in a microcrystalline wax to keep it from leaking out. So we're about to start covering this cone area. We're going under 4/4 on both sides because there's 8 strands in my right hand and 8 strands in my left hand. And I'm just trying to lay all the strands on top of each other as precisely as I can here. Okay, I'm going to pin this right there, and I'm going to lower the camera because the camera's kind of high. So, I hate the TV in the background, but not much I can do. I can move the camera back a little bit, give myself a little more light. Now this camera is setting about on my forehead. Try and cool it down. It's been recording for a while. So what are we at? Half an hour now, 28 minutes, something like that. So this is more like my natural speed than when I'm trying to have something to say, I guess. And I guess I can babble and do stuff. Once in a while, something I say may be useful. That's why I do it. That's why I put the videos out. So, try and show how I go about doing stuff in case you guys want to make one this way. You may only make one this way and go, oh, this is horrible. This is too much work. But I promise you, you'll like the result of how this is in the end. So you get good compression of the core and good tension and a nice taper. And it does require you have a bunch of different cordage that you can reach out and grab, but most whip making requires that. Yeah. There's a little bump here, a little bump there. I might go to 20 in here. Yeah, probably in here I'll go to 20. So just try and do it the same on both. And the more you do this type of stuff, I don't know how some of these people do it. They have scripts and a bunch of stuff, and I'm just showing you how I go about doing something. And if it's useful to you, please like and subscribe to my videos. I don't have anybody supporting me. I do sell these on the store. So I have a website called pocketsnakes.com. It's a type of snake whip. These are convertible, so you can use them as a signal style or a snake whip style. They have a nice English eye at the end if you want to add a quick change. English eye falls, like a 4-3-2 falls that's out of one piece of cord and tapered. I make those. I came up with those. And I go in bursts making these. I tell people when the music's playing or whatever it is, these seem to go better for me. If it's feeling right and working how I want it to, it's a joy to set and braid, and when everything is just fighting me, I'll put it away for a while because it doesn't want to be happening today. So you'll see I pin the last thing I crossed always with my thumb, and that keeps the tension even. It helps keep all the strands in alignment, so you don't have to check to see that you're crossing strands as you go. So it slows down the braiding a little bit though, but it speeds up the unbraiding because you don't have to do it as often. We probably have 16,000 foot of this material setting ready to be used in most. I have a spool of most of the colors of this whipmaker cord. It only comes in basic primary kind of colors, like it has electric blue and a hunter green and a kind of a solar maybe yellow. And it's got like an imperial red. And then there's an international orange in there, and a coyote brown, and a white, and a black. Not a lot of fluorescent colors. I'm coming up to the next bump. So this is the next bump down here. I guess I'm focusing more on the braiding than the talking, but this is my typical day, is setting and plating stuff or doing anything other than plating stuff to give my hands a rest. I'm going to drop the camera again. Tilt this head a little bit. The camera's kind of warm. Moving a chair in. Now I coated this with barges cement. I'm setting on my scissors. Once you coat it with barges cement, you can trim up these tips pretty fearlessly. So that was the waste from the first belly, which isn't exactly 100% waste, because I save every scrap to do different things with. Mostly because I'm frugal. or as other people would call it, cheap. So, okay, so between that bump and here, so right in here, I need to add my next 4 strands. It's about 2 full passes at 16. So I love setting and playing with the tension in these to get them as perfect as I can. But you have a limited amount of stuff you can do to change how things go. But you can create more compression in the core, which gives it a little more stiffness, and you can variegate that so that it's less tension on the end and stiff by the hilt. So in this method, you tend to increase the tension as you go. So you want to keep the side facing the whip the same so you don't roll a strand. And part of what I'm doing here is I'm drawing it all the way around to keep it from twisting. So when I reach through and grab this, I'm laying it in exactly how I want it. I used to paint the underside of the strands with a little bit of beeswax, which has some advantages, because then you can see when you flipped a strand and stop, and it adds a little friction to the whip. Makes it smell a little bit like honey. But in Arizona anyway, this you leave it in the car for 20 minutes and that wax has a mind of its own as it cooks off. You'll notice we've gone to about 60 degrees, not quite. Then we're coming up on the halfway mark. So we have 4 fingers and 4 fingers, so I need to do a couple more to get it right in the center. Okay, so I'm gonna tension these up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, pin in it. Strand that was too short. Right here. It's probably still too short. No, it's just right. Woohoo! I can make use of that. Pinch that. Don't pin my shirt down. Okay. Going under 5 now. Under 5. Over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One that's pinned to the core here is the looser one, so I don't want to go under 2 of those because that just, he's asking for trouble. Okay, this one's a single, and then I'm into doubles for 2. Okay, so this one is the loose one, this one is the tied down one. I'm tightening the tied down one first. Under 5 over 5. I was taking it from the wrong side there. Okay, so these are the 2. That one's the tied down one on the left. It's under 5 over 5. And this one's the loose one, and this one's the tied down one. Under under 5/5. And this one is the loose one, so I'm just laying it. I'm just laying it, not tugging on it. And I'm going to snug it on this side and lay it. Under 5/5. I'm just going to snug this side because that's the newly laid under strand. And then I can go back to tensioning. So anyways, you are doing a 20 plate. There's now 10 strands on each side. And you can kind of see how this lays out as you go. Sometimes I don't know exactly what's wrong and I have to go look and see where the bottom strand is pointing to choose where to go pick up the next strand. Because if you do 2 for one side, you'll be like, what the heck? Why is my count off? So but at 20 plate for a belly, it's this belly went from 8 to 20 over the course of however many inches or feet. And my hands are getting tired. I can only braid for an hour or 2 before my hands start talking to me. I've already done 3 hours of the braiding just this morning to get to this point, or today. You'll probably notice on whenever you catch a glimpse of one of my shirts, when the shirt color changes, it's usually another day that I've come back to this whip because I was able to pin it. It's not like working in leather where once the leather's wet and stretched and oiled and laid, I have to lay it all before the leather dries. So it's not like that. One advantage this material has is it's consistent thickness and it has almost no stretch. You don't have to try and maintain a moisture level and then keep oiling the leather or keep it supple, so you're not constantly working on it. I'm not sure if when I do the 275 paracord, if the overlay is going to end up at 32 or 36 yet. May end up being a 36 plate over the top of this core. But it'll at least be a 32. So somebody's going to have a very nice pair of 32 plate whips when I'm done with these. But before I can do the overlay, I've got to do another belly just like this on the other core, which is setting over to the side. And once you get in a rhythm with this, you can set and braid for hours. If your hands go numb, you should stop. It's your body telling you you've done too much for the day. I used to think your hands were done when they started bleeding, because I'd wear the calluses off because I was braiding way too hard. I was trying to braid and plait under a huge amount of tension instead of tensioning it before laying each strand in place. I used to plait a whole set, a whole rotation, and then tension all of it up, and that has other issues. So I started doing this, snugging it up and then plating it loose. There's not a lot of friction, so every time you tension it, it goes 1.5 or 2 times up, and is where it's biting in. And I don't spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos other people make on making whips, because part of the fun of this is just improving what I'm doing a little at a time. Once in a while I'll watch somebody else's videos and see how they do it, but to start with, I was worried it'd contaminate my process and take some of the fun out of learning by doing. So, trying to complete the second belly here, down to about 14 inches or so, 15 inches. The more I sit and do this, the more I find it soothing. If I found this irritating, I wouldn't do it. I like doing some fancy plating, but I may take 6 or 8 hours because I'm not fast at it. I'd have a hard time working for somebody's whip shop for sure. Coming over a bump. This is the next bump in diameter. So I've got to shallow out the angle a little bit as I go over the bump. That helps you not end up with a twist where it goes from one diameter to another. Anyway, if you guys have comments, please leave me a comment whether you like it or hate it. Happy to learn what you guys think about stuff. These videos are uncut. Whatever I say or do is pretty much in them. I don't edit them and put voiceover. I don't put in intro or ending slides. So I hope you like them how they are. Sometimes I send them to the customer, but I don't always shoot video because it's hard to get a quiet enough house to set and shoot video in, or get my office close quiet enough so that the TV doesn't drive the camera nuts. There's a lot of repetition in this because you're basically just going under 5/5. It's not rocket science and it's not super interesting. Although you'll notice that the angle changed from here to here as I went over that bump. And I don't think there's really any more bumps for the next 10 inches or 12 inches. It's pretty uniform the rest of the way. If you're used to plating at 45, plating at 60 is a little different. But it does create a lot more compression than 45. It also eats up a lot more lace, or a lot more string, or a lot more cord, however you want to put it. Alrighty. So I've been recording for an hour, and I've still got a foot to go. 9, 10, 11, 12 inches. But after an hour of braiding, my hands need a break. Give it a little wiggle. And so one double check you can make, you can fold it back. You can see I have twice the length on one side, which means even at 60 degrees, I can plate this on over. And the barge cement is still tacky. So braid this on over, and I'll cement it in place. And I'll hang up the other core, and I'll come back over the top and do one more of these, probably today. Anyway, this check with pocket snakes, I'm going to pause this or stop this. Go take a little break. I'll be back to see you in a few. Hi there, this is Chuck with pocket snakes. I'm going to try and finish up this 20 plate section of this whip. Give my hands a break for a few minutes. We're going under 5/5, just a standard whipmaker plate. And the TV's louder than ever, so I may end up muting a bunch of this just because there's always stuff interrupting the flow in the background. But I wanted to put the complete second belly up as a video stitched together from two. I estimated an hour and a half for this 3 foot of belly, going from 8 to 20 plate. So it wasn't a horrible guess. I've got an hour and 3 minutes or something in the first 2 feet. And who knows how long it'll take me to finish the last foot of the 3 foot of plating at 20 plate, but it'll take a minute, I'm sure. But it goes faster when I'm not trying to talk and think of interesting things to say. I'm trying to lay this basically right over the top of the stitching here from the previous belly. I'm probably seating these at 20-25 pounds at this point. This is the stiffer section by the hilt. You kind of want it to stand proud of your arm and get it out and away from your body a little bit. It is a snake, but I wanted to give these 4-footers a little bit more body, because when somebody orders a pair, they're oftentimes throwing 2 of them at once as a stage performer. And I've got the camera pointing almost down, and I've got the whip hanging off at an angle so that I can back up and still let you see me plate up the last couple feet, or last foot or so. And then this will be a completed core with 2 bellies, and then I have to put a second belly on the other 4-foot core of the matched pair, following the same add points and tensioning as I did on this one. I used to hang these 2 whips, and I'd do 1 pass at a time on each whip, and that takes freaking forever. And it allows for even better control over perfection. But, you know, on 2 4-foot whips, sometimes that meant I was spending 6 hours or 7 hours just to make a foot progress on a 3-foot second belly. And there's 3 foot, so 3 times 6. You can imagine how long it takes to put a pin in it every single pass and do the second one. So I'm just plugging away at it. First one I built. Took me almost a week to stick the second belly in it. So it does take a while. It also takes me a lot to try not to run into the tripod here, because I've got this tripod set up with about a 2-foot offset, hanging a little tiny GoPro Mini off that's right above my forehead. So you pretty much have almost the same view I have on the rim. So, but if you worry you braid too slow, just take your time, figure it out. There's faster ways to plate this. There's very few ways that are better at maintaining the tension, because I'm alternating which thumb is pinching off the tension that's in there. So the main reason I lock off the tension as I do this is not because these are under a lot of tension. It's literally that if you lose the last couple strands tensioned, you can have these roll underneath, and then you cross 2 strands by accident. This prevents it. It's my method I came up with as I was doing stuff. I'm sure somebody else out there is just as smart as I happen to be with this stuff and has figured this out. So thus I'm reinventing the wheel. But I didn't have anybody telling me how to go about stuff, so I'm always playing around with ways that work, figuring out what works about it, and trying to improve upon the method. This is just one way to do it. There is no right way to do stuff. There's lots of ways that will work. And largely, as long as you're making forward progress and you're plating stuff up and you're maintaining the tension and the compression as you go, you're going to have a good result at the end. You can double check how straight your line is, you know. This isn't the pretty overlay version. This is the second belly of 2 bellies. There's a 2-foot belly and a 3-foot belly plated in reverse on this whip. So there's lots of faster ways to build whips. I just keep trying to refine with my nylon stuff. Repeatable, consistent things that work well and hold up well with longevity. Leather's a totally different animal requiring totally different tools and methods and thought processes. And I do some leather braiding with kangaroo or cowhide, either one. You probably can see the cowhide strips hanging. Those are for, there's some like 6.5 foot long strips for a 4-foot whip. And I cut the feathers for those to make a few of them, and then I only ended up making a couple, and then I have all these hanging strips because I never went back. I made another 4-footer. But as long as I was cutting feathers, I cut out enough tapered feathers to build like 6 whips that were 8 plate, feathering to nothing. And they're tapered strips for the cowhide over there. And they're all wet, stretched, and beveled and prepared, and I still have to build a core if I'm going to build those. But it's a project for another day. The project for this week is trying to get these 2 out the door, and then after these 2, which are 4-foot snake whips, then I have a pair of 4-foot mini bowls, and that's made out of this material, so there'll be probably 3 bellies, or 2 bellies and an overlay, all in this whipmaker cord. So everything worthwhile seems to take plenty of time to make, plenty of time to do. I've never been happy with most of the quick methods for braiding whips. I just have tried to get better at doing these with some reasonable speed. Also, if I didn't put so much tension into the whips, I this would go a lot faster if I didn't have to tension them so much, because I wouldn't have to stop so many times to let my hands rest. I like the higher plate count whips. You can make them very smooth, very pretty, and you can do some fancy plating if you do a side-by-side pattern. Having a couple strands in a color will help keep you from crossing strands as well, because the count will go off if you cross strands. Doing it all black is actually a little bit harder than having a couple strands of a color running through this. But And the end of this has got a little flat piece, which is the not shot loaded, and then this is the shot loaded part of the core. And the glue ends at the end of the shot loading. And it's barred cement that I've coated all the strands with to lock them in place. And it's a nice trick to be able to trim off the ends and know where you're at. So getting down to the last few inches. This is exciting. Probably won't even do the other belly, the second belly on the other whip until tomorrow. And I don't know that I care to record that whole thing because it's an identical, it'll be so identical to this one, except the words I use will be different. What I'm thinking about and talking about will be different. But I always encourage people, if they want to make whips, follow along, get some supplies, make some whips. You'll know if it's for you. You'll either be tearing your hair out or you'll be like, oh, this is kind of neat. You'll know if you are going to enjoy braiding, I would say, within 5-10 minutes of starting. Because you have to do everything badly before you get better at it. And as you improve, you'll be faster at it, and it'll lay nicer, and then it'll behave itself, and you'll learn some tricks so that you don't cross strands as often, and you'll be less frustrated with it. So that one is starting to come off the shot bag. And those last two are completely off of the shot bag. Smoother you are and more precise in your actions, the less the tension will be really off. Your tension would be pretty consistent if you act consistently, and if you do crazy things and change what you're doing, you're going to find yourself tearing your hair out, which nobody needs to do. Okay, so now these two are right at the end of the shop bag. Those are the last two. Okay, so I'm going to tension this up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So all 20 strands are tensioned up. Run this up into there, and you can see that bump. So I'm going to right there up about a thumb's width. I'm going to add a passive, a little bit of barge cement. And people like, do you use that indoors? It's like you shouldn't, but I do. I open a window and turn it on here, and then I walk out of the room for half an hour while it sets up. That's part of the time of doing this, is letting it dry. So you can kind of follow the taper on down. Well, thank you very much. If you made it all the way through, please like, share, subscribe. So it was an hour and 20 minutes worth of stuff, roughly all told. This Trek with Pocket Snakes. Thank you for watching.